Hello and welcome to Trivial Knits. All right, welcome back everybody. Thank you for watching this modestly small YouTube channel at this point, but I'm getting new subscribers every day, which is very exciting. And I've got a lot of video ideas planned out. We'll see how quickly I can execute them, but I am glad you're here for this one. My name is Laura. I have been knitting for about 20 years-ish, probably a couple more. And I currently live in Los Angeles. I have been on a bit of a journey, as you might imagine, over a couple of decades in my knitting. And I was reflecting on my favorite yarns and how those have evolved over the last 20 or so years. So I thought that might be kind of an interesting video idea to talk about what my current favorite yarns are. That'll be sort of the bulk of the content here, but also to talk about how I got here and maybe some that I'm interested in trying in the future, even though I haven't yet. And we'll see how I reconcile that with my attempt to buy less yarn in 2026. We'll see. So I would love to share my favorite yarns with you today and hear what your favorite yarns are. So please get ready to share those in the comments with me. If you like some of the same ones I do, or if you like different ones, or can suggest some substitutes that are comparable, I would love to hear all of that. One thing we do here on this channel is trivia, hence the name Trivial Knits. And I've talked in my other videos about why the channel is called that, and I feel like that's getting a little tired. So if you have seen my previous videos, you'll know. But one of the most obvious reasons is that we do talk about trivia related to fiber and yarn and textiles and the fiber arts. So we start off with a question, and then I encourage you to type your answer to the question or your guess in the comments below. And then at the end of the video, I will reveal the answer. So today's question is not strictly wool or yarn related or knitting related even, but I feel like the people who take an interest in these kinds of YouTube channels have a larger, broader interest in textiles and clothing and maybe history as well. I think we're all kind of nerds on some level, right? So a book that I have been reading lately that I picked up on the 50-cent table at my local library's book sale is this one. And it's called Life in the Middle Ages, Scenes from the Town and Countryside of Medieval England. It's by Martin Whittock. Oh, no, it's a brief history of life in the Middle Ages. And it is pretty brief. You can see it's not that thick of a book. So I kind of just casually like reading histories like this, and I'm always keeping my eye out for things related to my other hobbies. And so in this one, I thought there was sort of an interesting topic that they talked about in England in the Middle Ages. And this is actually something I used to teach about a little bit. I used to be a college professor and I taught cultural studies. And one of the classes that I loved teaching the most was about fashion. So we would talk about the history of fashion, but also fashion's relationship to power and society and class and identity and all of those things. So this is a topic I would have covered in that course, but I'm going to share it with you here. And I'm curious to know how many people, like casual viewers with a casual relationship to fashion and textiles and things, will have heard of this concept. So the trivia question is, what are sumptuary laws? Or what were sumptuary laws? So this book is talking about sumptuary laws enacted in the mid-14th century in England. And so my question to you is, what were those? What were those laws about? So if you know or have a guess, go ahead, put it in the comments below. If you don't know, just wait till the end of the video and I will reveal. I'll read you like a paragraph from this book that explains it. And then hopefully you will leave having learned something mildly interesting. All right, so with that, let's get into the yarny stuff. So I don't know if this is interesting to anybody else, but I think maybe some context is kind of helpful. So I've been knitting since the early 2000s when I was in college. I taught myself to knit out of like a book I bought at a craft store, probably like Michael's or Joann. I don't remember which one. And I bought those, big plastic needles that were like size 11 or something, and worsted weight acrylic yarn that probably cost a couple dollars. So that's kind of what I learned on. That's what I could afford. I was a college student. I didn't have a lot of disposable income. And that's kind of mostly what I knit with for the first few years. I remember knitting quite a bit with Lion brand Homespun, which was an acrylic boucle type yarn. I don't know if it still exists. I don't know if you can still buy it, but it came in these sort of heathered colors. So I think the idea was that it would look like hand spun. So it was called Homespun, I think. And it had kind of a thick and thin texture, but it was just because of the way the yarn was made. I'm sure it was completely factory manufactured. It was cheap. You could get it at the big box thrift stores. So that I knit with quite a bit in my first few years, and other just like cheap acrylic worsted weight yarns. Then around, I want to say it was around like 2008 or 9, I discovered Nitpicks. And this also corresponds with when I joined Ravelry. So I joined Ravelry at the very end of 2008, and I think Ravelry was founded in 2007. So it was probably like out of beta, like anybody could sign up for it. Although I do think you had to, at the time, like get an invitation. So like I went back through my email and saw that I had my application to be a member of Ravelry was accepted at the end of 2008. So I don't remember exactly what the process was, but there was a bit more of a process at the time. And that's probably where I learned about different kinds of yarn and different places you could find patterns. Before Ravelry, patterns were like, in books or on blogs. Knitty.com was huge for me. That was a main place where I discovered patterns and designers. And now all of those patterns you can find them through Ravelry as well. So that was around when I discovered Nitpicks. And also at this time, I'd only really been using like soft acrylic yarns. I did not have a tolerance for wool or natural fibers other than like soft treated cottons. Okay, so most of what I was buying from Nitpicks in the early days, or ordering from them because they were online, was cotton and acrylic yarn. So I had quite a collection. Oh, and linen too, like some of their linen yarns. So I had a lot of those yarns. I still have some of those in my stash, honestly, because like they're not that great. So I didn't use them all up. I mean, they're great for people who want to use them. This is nothing against the quality of those yarns. And I did knit several things with them. But I guess I have been an avid knitter that whole time, but it wasn't until about 2020, maybe a year before that, that I kind of really started to knit more seriously and more frequently and more productive. I was still ordering from Nitpicks a lot. I still didn't have a lot of disposable income. I was in a fine situation, but I just wasn't in a place where I wanted to spend a lot of money on yarn. So I was still going for kind of the bargain yarns from Nitpicks. And I will talk about Nitpicks because they are still one of my favorite yarn brands. But I would say about 2019 and then 2020, 2020 was when I own my own business where I'm kind of like I'm an editor and a publishing advisor for scholarly book authors. And I've been doing that since 2015. But around 2020 was when my business kind of exploded, partly because my clientele was at home with the pandemic, just like everybody else, and now had sort of time and resources to devote to improving their writing and achieving their publishing goals and seeking out someone like me to help them with that. So I started making a lot more money around that time. And one of the things I wanted to invest in was my hobby. Knitting also became even more important to me during the pandemic, as it did for a lot of people. It was a sort of stress reliever, a way to just kind of stay in the moment, but also at the same time to be planning without catastrophizing, if that makes sense. So when you're like planning your next knitting project, the stakes are extremely low, but it does give you something for your brain to be focusing on and taking all of that nervous energy that I think a lot of us felt during the pandemic when times were unpredictable. We didn't know what the future would hold for more high stakes things like the health of our family, our jobs, the economy, all of that. So knitting kind of became my outlet there. So I knitted a lot more, and I started exploring a lot more yarn brands and fiber types. And because I own a small business, I saw how important it is to support small businesses, one-person operations, or small group operations, local operations. So I don't know, this just became more important for me. And I actually specifically remember when I had my Jeopardy audition. So if you haven't been here before, you may not know, I'm a 2-time Jeopardy champion. That's also part of the reason we call this Trivial Knits. And so I had my Jeopardy audition in the fall of 2020. It was over Zoom, as you might imagine. It was actually right after Alex Trebek passed away, which was sad. But so if you've ever been to a Jeopardy audition, or if you haven't, I will let you know that one of the things they are testing you for, in addition to your trivia knowledge, is your ability to talk about yourself on camera. Because, in the middle of every Jeopardy episode, there's a little chit chat between the host and the contestants. And this was the thing that struck fear into my heart about being on Jeopardy more than anything else. Because sometimes Alex could be a little snarky with people. And actually, I tried out for Jeopardy and made it to the audition stage back in 2006, maybe. And I never got the call back. And I was convinced it was because I blew the chit chat portion. I didn't have good answers. I didn't have anything fun to say about myself. I hadn't realized that was going to be important. So I was sort of more prepared for this one in 2020 when I got that call. And one of the things they ask you is, if you win, what will you spend your winnings on? And one of the things I said was, I want to support small businesses that make yarn, because knitting is my hobby that I love, and I would love to have the disposable income to be able to do that. So fast forward a few weeks, I did get the call. I got to go on Jeopardy, and I won quite a lot of money. Not enough to change my life, but enough to have much more cash on hand than I had had before. And so from that time forward, I did decide I was going to use that money to support local and small yarn businesses and to learn about more yarns and, try a lot of different things. And so that's what I have done over the past several years. So I just wanted to give that context. And I've already spent my Jeopardy winnings. It was on a few years ago, and I spent them on other things than yarn. But I still have a pretty decent income from my business that allows me to invest in my hobby and to invest in other small businesses. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there as how I look at my spending on yarn, because I know some of the yarns I'm going to talk about are not accessible to everyone. They are kind of a higher price point. So I just want to put out there that I have been there. I have been in the position where I couldn't afford the more expensive yarns, or I didn't want to spend my money on that. And I think that's perfectly okay. And I think there are definitely ways to get creative and follow sales. And I still love Nitpicks as a pretty budget-friendly yarn brand. So yeah, I just putting that out there. I guess that tells you a little bit about myself and where I'm coming from, and maybe you can relate a little bit as well. The other thing I want to sort of circle back to is the natural fibers. So as I said, I was very sensitive to wool fibers for a long time. And actually on my first Jeopardy episode, that was like the thing we chatted about, that I had my little chit chat with the host, where we talked about how I'm always knitting, but because I am sensitive to wool, I didn't keep a lot of the things that I made out of wool. I would gift them to people I knew, or honestly to strangers on the internet. And you might imagine that when you say that on national television, you get messages from strangers on the internet who want you to knit them things. I didn't really think that one through, but it was fine. One regret I do have is that in that moment when the host was asking, it wasn't Alex at this point, when the host, and it wasn't Ken Jennings either, it was like a temporary host, which we don't need to go into, but when he asked me about my knitting, I just like, what came out of my mouth was that I'm allergic to wool. I am not allergic to wool. I understand that that's a very specific medical condition and that some people are allergic, like to the lanolin or other things that come with wool, but I was just sensitive to it. I just found it itchy and kind of intolerable. But what I have found over the last 5 years since I filmed that is that I could build up my tolerance. So I have done that. I have knitted with more natural fibers. I have worn them to the extent that I could. I have learned that just from like the knitting community, I have learned that the colder it is, the more tolerable the rustic wools are. So that could explain why I don't always get along with them, because I live in Los Angeles. It never gets freezing cold here. It might get down into the low 40s in the morning, like when I'm taking my kids to school. And that's when I use my woolly wools the most. But I have found that over time, getting myself accustomed to those fibers and fabrics has worked. And I can now wear natural fibers much more than I could in the past. So that's also kind of context that's important for understanding why I like the yarns that I like and that I'm going to talk about. Okay, so I've been talking a long time and I haven't even gotten to the yarns yet. So thank you for your patience if you're still here. So I have 5 brands that I want to share as the ones that I go back to again and again, that I have really developed a love for. And I almost feel like I have a relationship with them, if not with the companies that make them, but with the yarn for sure. And I have a lot of this yarn in my stash, so I will be using it for, months and years to come. I don't know how much more I'll be acquiring since I do have a lot in my stash, but we'll talk about that. And I'll also talk a little bit about some alternative yarns that I would like to learn more about. And so if you know about any of those, I would love to hear from you in the comments. Okay, so I want to begin with probably my favorite yarn of all time, like good all around yarn that I love to use, love to look at, love to wear, and knit with, and all of that. And that is Westwool by Stephen and Penelope. So that is the house brand yarn of Stephen and Penelope, which is a local yarn store in Amsterdam, which is co-owned by Stephen West, who is an American designer who lives in Amsterdam now. And so I've always been aware of Stephen West, of course, and I had knit a few items by him early in my knitting journey, or earlier, I guess, but around 2019, 2020, I really started to become kind of a super fan. So I've knitted a lot of Stephen West items, probably over 60. I mean, definitely over 60. Because there were a few years there where I was like almost exclusively knitting his designs and knitting a lot of them. I've tapered off on that a little bit as I've just tried to try other things and getting more into garment knitting and all of that. But yeah, so following Stephen pretty closely and knitting his designs, I sort of naturally got introduced to his yarn brand. So I'll show you some of the things I've made from it, and I should probably grab a skein of it, but I don't think I want to do that because I don't want to like rustle with my stash. But it comes in several weights at this point. It used to be just fingering weight and then DK weight, and it was just those two for a while. So the fingering weight is called Bicycle and the DK weight is called Tandem. And it used to be a 90% merino or Falkland merino wool, 10% textile. Now they've reformulated it, the Bicycle and the Tandem. So now that I think they are 100% Falkland merino wool, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I don't have the label right in front of me, but I'm pretty sure. It's a 2-ply. Well, the Bicycle is a 2-ply. The Tandem, I think, must be a 4-ply. Although don't quote me on that. I'm sorry, I'm not super prepared for this. I did my best, but I have found this yarn is very pleasant to work with. It's like easy on the hands. I have found it very tolerable to wear. I experience almost no itch with it at all. And I think it's relatively durable. I'm not seeing a ton of pilling or snags or issues with the garments that I've made. The downside of this yarn is that it's only available from Stephen and Penelope, which is located in the Netherlands. So, there's shipping, and I'm not sure how tariffs have affected it because I haven't purchased any since the tariffs in the US went into effect. But I just so highly recommend this yarn. I love it. Last time there was a sale on it, or one time when there was a sale on it, I bought a lot. So I have plenty to work through in my stash. So I haven't bought it recently. But I was tempted by the sale I saw this week and the free shipping, but I controlled myself and did not buy because I have plenty to work with. But so let me show you some of the items I've made with it. And these are kind of in no particular order, except for the pile that I just have sitting here. So this is a hat that I made out of Tandem. So this is the DK weight. This is the Vold hat by Atelier Cliché. I'm not going to talk too much about the patterns. I've talked about most of these in previous videos. And you can find on my Ravelry, which is also Trivial Knits. And if you have any questions about the patterns themselves, or the yarns for that matter, just post in the comments, because that's the easiest way for me to kind of anticipate, or not anticipate what you would want to know, but just tell you what you would want to know. So yeah, so I made this hat, and you can see, hopefully you can kind of see, it has a little bit of pilling, but nothing that I would say is excessive or makes it seem too ratty. It just kind of has a lived-in sort of feel. And it's very soft, and I love to wear this hat. It's just like a very good standard, easy throw-on kind of beanie with this yarn. And you can start to see some of the color variety. There's a ton of colors available in the Bicycle and Tandem lines. And I think in the other lines too now. As you might imagine, the yarn company owned by Stephen West would have. He does a lot of very colorful maximalist designs. So that is one of the other things I really love about that line, is there are some of my favorite colors, plus dozens and dozens more, are available in Westwool. Here's a solid color hat made up in Westwool Tandem, and this is the color Lichen, and this is a Stephen West design that I test knit. And I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but if you want to know, just ask me and I'll tell you. I'll look it up and tell you. But you can see this one uses like dip stitches and textured stitches, and this yarn is great for that. I think it shows off the texture very well. And again, this is a DK yarn that is pretty round and plump, and so good for that kind of thing. Here is one of the Stephen West mystery knit-along shawls. This is I'm showing you the back side by accident. This is the Geo Gradient, I'm fairly sure. Let's see if I can back up so you can see the whole thing. So this is made in 4 colors of the Bicycle, the fingering weight 2-ply. And this is the new formulation because these are newer colors, or some of them are. So these 4 colors are, let's see, the dark green is Wellington, the middle green is green olive, the kind of lighter greenish is Dijon, and this peach color is white peach. So a couple of these are new colors, a couple of them have been available for a long time, but they're all available now. And the Dijon color is like my favorite color. I love it. I was very tempted to buy a sweater's quantity of it this week, but I held off. I stayed strong and I did not. But you can see this makes like, I knitted this on like a size 5 needle probably. So it's a fingering weight yarn. It makes like a nice drapey kind of fabric. And this is, you know, a lot of garter stitch, and it just has, it's really great for that kind of application, that kind of shawl. This is another garter stitch shawl that I test knit for Stephen West. This is the stripe geometry. This is also made in 3 colors of Bicycle. This one is, the reddish is Cardamoma. The peach is Sherbet, I believe. And the yellow is, ooh, I don't know I'm sorry, I don't know the color name of the yellow. It might just be like gold or something like that, but don't quote me. If you really want to know what that color is, I'll look it up for you and let you know. To give you more sense of the color range, this is a cowl I made, and this is a DK weight cowl. It's the Ion cowl by Andrea Gaughan. And I made this in like 7 or so colors of Bicycle held double. So the Bicycle, if you hold it double, it's the same weight as the Tandem DK. And I found that they are interchangeable. So that's also really handy because I've combined those yarns in some projects, which I will show you in a second, actually. But so you can see there's all these beautiful colors, and I just sort of randomly arranged them in this stranded colorwork cowl. Couple more to show you. This is another cowl. I can't remember if this was a test knit or I just knit the pattern after it came out, but this is using Stephen's sort of dip stitch technique. And again, this is other colors you've seen in the projects I've just shown. And this was, I believe, I held Bicycle double for some of these, and some of them might have been the Tandem DK. So as you can see, just like unmatched for the color variety and the way you can express yourself through color using this yarn. And I'll show you a couple garments. So this one I've shown quite recently. This is my Funfetti Raglan by Andrea Gaughan. I'll try to hold it up so you can see the whole thing a little bit. So this is a DK weight pattern, and I used mostly Bicycle held double, but some Tandem that I had in my stash. And as you can see, it all went together well. And I think at least one of the contrast colors I switched in the middle from Tandem to Bicycle held double, and you can't tell. I don't think you can tell, but I can't tell in person either where that happened. And again, from the wear, you can see I've worn this several times, and there's a little bit of pilling like on the underarm, but not a lot, not a lot on the back. I'm not really seeing any on the back, like where it would hit my pants. Look on the inside, not seeing any on the inside either. So I would say this has held up really well, particularly in this stockinette colorwork application. I have another garment. This one I made for Rhinebeck a few years ago. This is the Baseline sweater by Suzanne Sommer. And hopefully you can see the whole thing. This one I used Bicycle held double because it is also a DK weight. I believe it's a DK weight pattern. So I used several colors, and this one has pilled, I'd say, a bit more than I would have expected given how rarely I wear it. There's a little bit of pilling, but I really haven't worn it. I've worn it like twice maybe because it's quite thick. So it's useful if you're going to New York and it's going to be cold. It is not so useful in Los Angeles. But it's a garter stitch, so I think that sort of contributes to the higher pilling than the more tight gauge stockinette. that I used for the other sweater. But still very happy with the colors above all. I call this like my Bert sweater because it's sort of inspired by Bert from Sesame Street and his vertical striped sweater. Okay, so there's my cheerleading for Westwool. Hopefully you're won over. If you ever have the chance to go to Amsterdam, you gotta go to Stephen and Penelope and check out their yarn selection, or, you know, a fiber festival in Europe. I don't know that they do too many North American festivals, but yeah, I would love to go in person. And I will certainly be ordering it again once I kind of work through my stash. But I would love to do another garment in it. So someday I may order that sweater quantity specifically. For now, I just have the stash and I dip into it whenever I can or whenever I need to. All right. The next yarn I have fallen in love with is, or the next yarn brand is Brooklyn Tweed. And unfortunately, I fell in love with it about a month before they announced they were stopping production. So I don't have a ton of things I've made out of it, but I have hoarded quite a bit. And maybe someday I'll show you all of it. And if you want to buy some of it, maybe I'll sell it to you because I probably have more than I can use. But I'll show you a few things. One of which is this vest that I'm wearing. This is the checkered vest, also by Andrea Gaughan. This is like an Andrea Gaughan heavy podcast today, I guess. I test knit this and I used Brooklyn Tweed Shelter in the colors Pollen, that's the bright color, which is showing up well with my new camera setup. I hope people agree. And Yellowstone is the sort of darker greenish brown. So Brooklyn Tweed makes a number of different yarns, or made a number of different yarns. I especially like the Shelter and the Loft, which are woolen spun. Shelter is worsted weight, Loft is fingering weight. But I think they have a lot of scope for using them for different, at different gauges because of how the woolen spun yarn blooms. I haven't done a ton of experimenting. I have substituted the Loft for sport weight patterns and it's worked fine in those cases. I have also used the Imbue, and which is a worsted spun merino, or is it Targhee? I don't know, but it's very soft and it's very soft to wear as well. So I really fallen in love with that one too. So I have a bunch of all of that in my stash. I've also stocked up on the Tones, which is very similar to the Shelter, although I don't think it has the exact same fiber content. Not totally sure about that, but it's also a woolen spun worsted weight and fingering weight yarn that comes in some different colors. But I haven't knitted with those yet. I hope to do that at some point this year. But just to show you a few other items I have made in those yarns. There is my Through Lines by Andrea Mowry, which you have seen if you've seen my recent videos. This is also in the Pollen color, which I love. This is just like a dopamine color. Sitting down and knitting this made me so happy. And it's very soft and, you know, drapey and I don't have anything bad to say about Brooklyn Tweed Loft. And, you know, I've worn this a fair amount and it's not looking any worse for the wear. But because it's like woolen spun and all natural, like it does feel kind of rustic. So you're getting that sort of experience, but having a really nice feeling yarn that you can wear. Let's see. And then I've shown this recently too. This is my Andrea Mowry Nightlights, one of them that I've made. And this was in Brooklyn Tweed Shelter in Deep Dive is their navy blue color. And this is also combined with a few skeins of Spincycle Dream State, which I will be talking about in a second. So hang on for that. And again, I wear this one a lot. It's very soft. It's probably one of my coziest knits. That's just the easiest for me to wear. I don't have to like fight through the prickle or anything. I just enjoy wearing it and it keeps me really warm. You know, sometimes like soft or treated yarns aren't as warm, but this one is great. So yeah, I think that's all I need to say about the shelter and the loft. And then I have one more knit that I knit in 2025, so you may have seen it in that video. This is the Ori cowl. Alicia Plummer is the designer. And this one I also combined Brooklyn Tweed and Spincycle. And so this is the Imbue Sport in the color Cloak, I want to say. And then I'll talk about the Spincycle in a second. But this was what I was working on and loving to work on when I saw the announcement that they weren't going to produce it anymore. So I was a little panicked and bought up a lot of it that I could find. And I actually do have a sweater's quantity of this Imbue Sport that I'm hoping to make possibly the comeback again out of the Andrea Mowry cardigan pattern. So yeah, you know, the upside of Brooklyn Tweed is that it's awesome to work with, feels really nice, holds up well, American made, small business. Downside is they don't make it anymore. It's a pretty big downside. So I am kind of exploring alternatives that I've heard are similar. I don't need to explore them right away because I do have a lot of Brooklyn Tweed on hand now. But Harrisville, which I believe is the mill where they milled all, if not some, or some, if not all, of the Brooklyn Tweed yarns. So I do have a couple skeins of their nightshades and Peace Fleece, which is milled at Harrisville as well, I think, which is another woolen spun kind of heathered yarn. So I bought some of those at Rhinebeck and I hope to use them this year, and I will be able to compare and see if they're a good substitute for the Brooklyn Tweed. And then a couple brands that I want to check out that I haven't yet are the Durarum Natura, specifically their Ulysse and Gilead lines, which I have heard are sort of substitutes for the Loft and Shelter yarns. And then I've also heard that North Bay Fibers, their woolen spun yarn is also kind of similar to Brooklyn Tweed woolen spun yarns. So I haven't checked out those last two brands yet, but I hope to. And if you have used them, which I know they're very popular, so there's a good chance you have used them, I'd love to hear your recommendations or what you like about them, or if you have anything you don't like about them, or if you've noticed any major differences between those yarns and Brooklyn Tweed yarns. I'd love to know that. That would kind of inform what I try next. All right, I guess I'll talk about Spincycle now because I just told you a few of those, or I just showed you a few of those items that I've used. So Spincycle is one of those brands that like it has a little bit of a cult following, I would say. And they're like cool, you know what I mean? And they're expensive, like just, of course, cost and expensiveness is subjective, but compared to many other yarns on the market, they cost quite a bit, particularly for the amount you get in a skein. So the price of the skein might seem like just like on the slightly high end, but then you're not getting the same volume as you might from other brands. I don't know. But there's like no denying that it's beautiful. So I could not afford Spincycle for a very long time. I was trying to think about when's the first time I bought it, and I think it was just a few years ago. And I think it was these skeins that ended up making it into my nightlights in 2025. So I sat on these skeins for a little while. But there was like a local yarn store that I followed online that was having a sale, and they had 50% off Spincycle, which is like unheard of. So I jumped on that. I bought 3 skeins of this deep bump. This is the colorway Dream State. That's the worsted weight. And I loved it. And it works very well in this pattern, I think. And in many of Andrea Mowry's patterns, she uses Spincycle. So I was kind of like, well, that actually was a good use of my money. I mean, certainly at 50% off, but even at full price, I was very happy with the yarn that I got and the way I could use it. So I do kind of think it's worth the price. Actually, let me go back. This was actually the first skein of Spincycle I ever used. And so this is actually, now I'm remembering how I discovered it. I discovered it, or was able to use it for the first time, because I had joined Stephen West Yarn Along, which he does every summer, Northern Hemisphere summer. And he had a pattern that used one skein of Spincycle dyed in the wool, which is their sport weight, light sport weight. This is the colorway Big Sky. Okay, so it was a shawl design. I didn't end up making that shawl, but so I had the skein on hand, and then I believe this was a test knit for Casey Herlihy, or Casey Knits. She does a lot of colorwork cowls that are very beautiful. As you can see, this is the Reverb cowl. And so her pattern, I'm fairly sure I test knit that one. I've test knit a few for her, so and some I've bought, so it's hard to remember sometimes. But so this one is actually using, I think her test knit pattern called for Spincycle. So I had this on hand. And then the other yarn is actually Westwool Bicycle that was supposed to go in that other shawl that Stephen designed for the Yarn Along, but that I didn't end up making. And this is the color Tiger. So as you can see, it's just like the color shifting that you get with the Spincycle yarn is very beautiful, hard to argue with. I just love that. And of course it makes knitting anything more fun, because you're like waiting to see how the colors are going to emerge and how they're going to look in your specific pattern, which might be different than how they look in another pattern. So it makes the knitting really fun and motivating. So yeah, so I had used it for that. So I knew I liked their brand, and then I bought the worsted weight version of their color shifting for this one. I think I bought another one for an Andrea Mowry pattern that I'm not going to show because I actually don't love the yarn I paired it with, so I don't wear that one that much. Although maybe I'll try it a little more now that I'm a little more tolerant of natural fiber yarns. But then also here is the Ori cowl again. This is dyed in the wool in the colorway Salty Dog. So you can see they just have like a lot of different kinds of colors. And different levels of contrast in the shift that they make. But again, just like hard to argue with how beautiful it is. And so what I have found is with all color shifting yarns, it's kind of important to see the skein that you're going to get, unless you don't care what you get. But if you kind of have a vision in mind, or you want a skein that leans toward a particular hue, then it's best to buy them in person. And especially with something that is so expensive, you don't want to regret or take a gamble on the yarn. So for me, Spincycle has become a souvenir yarn. If I am at a local yarn store in a different city and they have Spincycle, I will try to see if they have, a specific colorway for their store. That's kind of cool. But if not, I'll still just look at what they have. And if there are specific skeins that speak to me, I will get them. So I do have a somewhat sizable stash of Spincycle skeins that I have picked up at local yarn stores and at festivals. So it will take me a while to go through them. The sort of paradox of the beautiful, expensive yarn is that you like don't want to use it on something that isn't worthy. So it's a big commitment to decide to actually use it into a pattern versus keeping it in your stash for that really special thing that could come along. So I haven't quite decided what to do with the skeins that I have. I've been tempted to do a jaunty with 4 skeins of dyed in the wool that I bought all in the same colorway, which was quite a splurge. But I'm worried it's not going to turn out, and it'll be a waste of those skeins that I could use for something else. But that's silly, right? Of course it would turn out beautiful. But I also want to decide, okay, do I want to stretch it further by striping it with something else, or doing color work with a solid color that I also have? So I have to decide that. But, these are very easy problems to have. Okay, so now, after talking about Spincycle, I want to talk about my other favorite color shifting yarn, which I'm wearing on my hat. And this hat was I think my first finished make of 2026. This is the Moki Beanie by Atelier Cliché. It is knit sideways with an I-cord edge on the brim, and it uses short rows to shape the crown. I'll take it off so you can see all of the colors. Excuse my hair, please. So this is Junction Fiber Mills Making Tracks DK. And so I cast it on here and then knit sideways around. And this is the Heyday colorway. And you can see it transitions from green to orange and yellow to like a peach coral back to green. And I just happened to sort of end on a green hue that's pretty similar to where I started. So it's somewhat seamless. It worked out perfectly. I highly recommend this pattern if you like short rows. And I'm not sure if anyone else has knit it with a color shifting yarn except me. I've done 2 now. But I think it's great. I think it's perfect for that kind of skein of yarn. So let's see. I like to wear it with the peach in the back. Yeah, so Junction Fiber Mill, Making Tracks. Junction Fiber Mill is a local yarn mill in Vermont. I believe they only process American wool. And they're sort of most known, they do custom processing for small farms, but they're most known now for their Making Tracks line, which is a 2-ply color shifting yarn. It is hand dyed, much like Spincycle is. And they just have like a beautiful variety of colors, and I'm going to show you many of them in just a second. I first discovered them on YouTube. Honestly, I don't know, I think I was like trying to like vicariously attend Vogue Knitting Live or something. And they had a video of them like setting up their booth, and it's just kind of a vlog of that, of the 2 owners at Vogue Knitting Live. And then I was just kind of hooked and I started watching their channel. Again, highly recommend their channel. I've recommended it before. They talk a lot about the yarn production process and how they develop new products. And it's really cool. It's like just like a really cool insight into a small mill, small business. And they've really, I think, taken off in the past few years. So it's kind of nice to see and to kind of feel like I've been watching their rise. Although I wasn't in on the ground floor, I found them on YouTube. But and I have been on their podcast, which was fun. So if you go to their channel, which is Junction Fiber Mill, and you search for Trivial Knits, you'll see me there. So I'll show you a few of the things I have made with their yarn. I will not show you all of them because I just have too many at this point, but I'll show you a few to give you just a sense of the different colors. They also have solid color and like more farm yarn that's not dyed. So I'll show you some of those, I think, but my love is really the color shifting. The Making Tracks that comes in DK weight and sport weight. It was originally just DK, but I think they added the sport shortly after that. And I think might like the sport weight the most, but both are great. This one's DK. All right, let me grab my bag. I also have their tote, which is like a beautiful green. And yeah, okay, so let's see. I'll show you my other Mochi beanie. This is a larger size than the one I'm wearing. I knit this one first. I really liked it, but I thought, I think this could be smaller. This has a real like winter hat feel, which is not practical in Los Angeles. I do more of like a watchman's cap. Is that what you call it? I don't know. More of like a shallower beanie is a little bit better for me most of the time. So that's why I made this second one, and I love it. I also have made this hat. I also showed this recently. This was the Rhinebeck knit-along hat. This is the Florence hat. And this I used 2 solid colors of their DK in ochre and natural. So they have a solid color line that goes with their color changing or can be used alone, as I did here. And then I also made Andrea Mowry's Day and Night. I can never remember if it's day and night or night and day. It's one of the 2. Cowl. This is one of her sort of bandana style cowls. This is using 2 colors. Again, the ochre and natural. And I'll say most of these, so to talk a little bit more about this yarn, it's I'd say it's fairly rustic. It's not like the most rustic yarn you're going to find, but it does have a prickle to it. It's not, you know, super wash treated or anything like that in any way. And it's not merino, so it's not like super soft. But I tolerate it quite well in hats and particularly in garter stitch applications where there's sort of like less surface area on my skin. And I'll show you a few of those patterns in a second. I will say this pattern, which is like a stockinette and slip stitch, this one's tricky for me to wear close to skin, especially this cowl, you know, where you're wearing it right up against your neck. This one has a prickle to it, so I don't wear it that often. I probably would not use this yarn again for an object like this, but hats that really don't touch much of my skin are totally fine. And I have knit a cardigan out of it, which is also a stockinette, and that one is a little prickly for me as well. Again, because I live in Los Angeles, if I lived in a cold climate and I was wearing that in the winter, it would probably be fine. So I'll show you a couple more of my garter stitch patterns. They're not my patterns, they're my objects that I made with other people's patterns. So this is the Lindell Torkel. That was the Rhinebeck knit along for Junction Fiber Mill in 2023. This is designed by Ona Walton. This is like an ingenious short row design. And I believe it was partially designed with this yarn in mind, or wholly designed with this yarn in mind. And so it makes this pattern makes such good use of the color shift. And it's, you know, a small little mini scarf. Maybe I'll put this one on to show you how I wear it. It works. I find it to be really wearable with the shape and size, and it's quite warm. Again, DK weight, natural wool, and I love it. This is probably one of my oldest, well, it's definitely one of my oldest objects I've made using this yarn, and it is pilling a little, but it's mostly pilling in the places where I like tie the knot, so it's rubbing against itself in that way there. But it doesn't look bad, and I could certainly clean it up if I wanted to. I don't know if I mentioned the colorway. This is in the clearing, I'm fairly sure, with a natural contrast, just the white. And then, so I love that one so much that I made the full-sized scarf or wrap in that series. So this is the Lindell shawl. I've shown this in my other videos before. So this is kind of a massive version of that small neck scarf. And it's also knit using short rows, and it's quite complicated, I will say. So it's not a mindless knit by any means, but it shows off the colors beautifully. This is actually the same colorway. So that will give you, I'll show you them next to each other. It will give you a sense of, you know, the variability you're going to get in a hand-dyed color shifting yarn like this. So I could have ordered making tracks. I mean, I did order making tracks in this case, and I didn't really know what I was going to get. I got this, which is a little more muted. And then I believe I bought these skeins in person at Rhinebeck. So I got to get the more bold version, which I love. One of my favorite colorways. And I'm extremely happy with this item. It has hardly pilled at all. I will say, because I live in Los Angeles, I haven't had opportunity to wear it that much, although I have taken it with me back east to wear in winter weather, and it's so warm, so cozy, very squishy. Highly recommend this pattern if you're into something with like a big payoff. So yeah, and then I'll show you one more that I've also shown kind of recently because I knit it last year. But this is Andrea Mowry's Flicker and Flame hat. And this one I used, the contrasting color is Making Tracks in the colorway Carnival, the DK. And the other yarn is one of their farm yarns. I guess you'd call it that. I think it's local wool to them. But it was an alpaca blend in a natural color. So I think it's beautiful in this hat. So I will say their yarn is like on the pricier side as well. It's probably comparable with the Spincycle. You know, it's in the $30+ range for a skein. and you're not getting a ton of yardage. I mean, for a DK, you're getting 200 yards. For the sport weight, I think it's also about 200 yards. So, you know, you're paying for a small yardage. You can make small projects with it and just use one skein. But if you're going to make a sweater or something with a lot of skeins, it's going to start getting pricey. But to me, again, it's worth it because I'm supporting a small business that is really transparent. And I know exactly where that money is going. And the yarn is also worth it to me. So yeah, love Junction Fiber Mill. I am a big fan. All right, and so the last yarn I want to talk about that I have already alluded to is Nitpicks, because they remain one of my absolute favorite brands. I will still get caught up in a Nitpick sale, which they have several times a year. And like every month there's a different yarn that is their yarn of the month and is discounted, and they have really deep discounts a couple times a year. So I think they are making interesting, like breed specific yarns available to more people. And also kind of like higher end type yarns like merinos and silk blends. And just have like really great basics and workhorse yarns. So I'm just going to show you a few. I couldn't begin to get into all of the things I've made with Nitpicks yarn over the years, but I'll show you just like a few different yarns that I've used quite a bit. Sorry, I gotta get my bundle here. Well, it's okay. So this is something I made in 2020. I remember very vividly ordering this yarn right before the first lockdown happened and being like, are we gonna get shipments? Are people gonna be working in the yarn distribution center? I don't know, but I got my order in and it came. And this was one of my first pandemic makes. This is the Painting Bricks Schlanket by Stephen West. It's huge. I did this in a DK weight, and I believe the pattern, you know, with a shawl, it doesn't really, your gauge doesn't matter. If I was going to do it again, I would use fingering weight. I believe some of Stephen's samples are fingering weight, and they're a little bit more reasonably sized. But so this I made in Nitpicks Swish in the DK weight. That yarn also comes in worsted weight. I don't know if it comes in any other weights, but I've used this yarn so many times for baby items specifically because it is very soft. And back when I couldn't really tolerate a lot of wools, this one was one that I could. And this is a superwash merino, 100% merino yarn. And this is, you know, I got rainbow colors for this one. I don't remember the colorway names, but again, I could look them up for you if you are curious about a specific one. But yeah, you know, because it's 100% merino and it's very soft, it does pill, but that's the trade-off you make. I think other than that, it's very high quality. And I've really never had problems or complaints with it. Another item I made out of that same yarn is the Dustland Cowl by Stephen West. And again, you can see from this, the texture is quite nice. So that worsted weight merino yarn, it's quite round. And so it's good for things where you want stitch definition, like this sort of Guernsey pattern. And this is the colorway Haystack Heather, which again is like one of my favorite colors. And I love this one from them. I also made the March hat. I want to say Emily Green. No. Megan something. I think her handle on Instagram is Megos Pearls, but I can't remember her real name. I'm so sorry. But this is the March hat. If you look it up, you'll find it, I'm sure. And this hat pattern was part of Kelborn Woolen's year of hats, but I didn't use Kelborn Woolen's yarn. I would love to use Kelborn Woolen's yarn. I have not had the chance to do it yet, but that is one of the ones that's on my list. And I have some of their yarn in my stash, so I will be using it soon. But yeah, I use the Nitpicks Swish worsted for this in the colorway Haystack Heather, and I love how it came out. Again, with the stitch texture, it's showing up great on camera, and that's what it looks like in person as well. Okay, let me show you a couple other items. Oh, I have this. This is the Painting Bricks hat. So I just used my leftovers from the Painting Bricks shawl. Again, this is Swish worsted. No, DK. In a variety of colors. There's a little bit of pilling on it. Not horrible. This is the Syncopation Adoration cowl by Stephen West. This one I used Nitpicks Gloss DK. So that is a wool and silk blend, and it's very soft. It has some sort of pilling, but again, nothing too outrageous. And this one comes in a variety of colors, and I think I bought it up on sale and had a bunch of different colors in my stash. Some of these, multiple of these were from baby items I made for my own children and then just had left over. So I made this kind of scrappy brioche shawl, and I think it works well for that. It's, you know, very drapey, as you might expect with a wool silk blend. And then a couple things I made last year, a couple hats I'll just share to give you a sense of other yarns that they have. This is a musselburgh hat made in their Sandscapes yarn, which is a heavy fingering weight color shifting. And I think this turned out very beautiful. I just, you know, if you're going for that color shifting look but want something on a little bit more of a budget than the Spincycle or the Junction Fiber mill, Nitpicks has a few options. They also have their Chroma yarn, which I've used quite a bit, which is single ply, as was this, I think. So it does have quite a bit of pilling, but it just mostly gives it kind of a halo, and I don't mind it. And then this beanie that I made very recently. This is the Ola hat by Suzanne Mueller, and I made this in Wool of the Andes worsted in the color Buttercup. And I've talked about it recently, so I won't talk about it much here, but this Wool of the Andes is like a workhorse. What kind of wool is it? Sorry, I mean, I guess Wool of the Andes makes you think Peruvian highland wool, right? So that's probably what it is. But I really like it. Also has really good color variety. And I also had to restrain myself from buying a sweater's quantity of it in their recent sale. But it was like on sale for $4 a ball. And I'm like, I think I can go lower. I think if I wait for the spring $2 sale, I'll be able to get some Wool of the Andes. We'll see if they have the colors I want at that point. But yeah, definitely very affordable and a really nice, just like natural, untreated or not superwash wool yarn that I think is going to hold up really well. I have worn this hat quite a bit over the past few weeks, and I see pretty much no sign of wear on it. So that's great. All right, I think that kind of covers everything I wanted to say, and I've been talking a long time, so I'm sure you're ready for me to be done. But yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on any of those yarns. Oh, no, one more thing. I've just remembered. Nitpicks palette is a yarn that I had not used I didn't use for a long time. It is probably one of their kind of signature brand yarns. They have like hundreds of colors of it. It's a 2-ply wool, non-superwash wool yarn. But I didn't use it for a long time because I was a little afraid I wouldn't be able to tolerate it. But now that I have kind of increased my tolerance, and I love the Westwool 2-ply so much, I thought, well, let me try the palette. So I did wait for the last time it went on sale, and I bought a sweater's quantity. I actually bought a cone and a sweater's quantity of balls. And so this is a sweater I am currently making. So I can't speak to how this yarn wears in terms of durability and pilling, but it's a pleasure to work with, I will say. It is like soft, but still a little bit toothy. So it's like a very nice sensory experience, I will say. And then they have so many colors to choose from. These were the colors my spouse picked for his sweater. This is the So Basic DK by Max the Knitter. So I'm holding palette double because palette's a fingering weight yarn. So to get this marled effect, which I think is turning out pretty good. So I've actually started this sweater over twice. This is the second second round through, and I've just split for sleeves, and I think this time it's going to fit. So I've got a long way to go because it's a pretty large size, but I'm enjoying it. And I actually bought up a bunch of other colors of palette, and I would like to make my own sweater in it soon, but we're going to try and make some progress on this one. And I have some other things in my queue before I get to that, but I'll report back. But I'd also love to hear from you on your feelings about it. I talked about it in a video the last couple years. And I think I heard in the comments from a lot of people that they love the palette yarn as well. So I felt pretty good about buying a fair quantity of it, and I will be using it soon, hopefully. Okay, so yeah, that's the last object I wanted to show. So let's wrap this up, and I will circle back to our trivia. So if you'll recall, the trivia question was, what are sumptuary laws that were passed in the mid 14th century in the Middle Ages? And so Martin Woodcock is going to tell us a little more about them. Okay, so sumptuary laws were laws handed down by the Crown of England that would prescribe exactly who could wear what. And he says, there is no reason to think that these laws actually succeeded in controlling what people wore, but they indicate that the people at the top of society, the nobility, wanted to enforce what people could wear and wanted there to be a distinction between what rich people could wear and what everybody else could wear. So I'll just read you a little more background on this in case you're also a nerd who finds this kind of thing interesting. If not, you can click away from the video now, and I'll see you next time. Please subscribe before you go. But here, so I'm on page 185 of A Brief History of Life in the Middle Ages, if you happen to get your hands on this and want to read more. He says, before the 1320s, status was mostly signaled by the amount and quality of clothes worn. After this period, there appears to have been an acceleration in fashionable concerns with style and tailoring, meaning different styles of clothing would come into fashion more quickly. This was greatly assisted by the innovation of buttons from around 1350 onward. These made it easier to wear closer fitting garments, and greater differentiation appears between male and female fashion from this point onwards. I thought that was very interesting. I love hearing about how technical innovations change culture or work hand in hand with cultural innovations. So buttons, who knew? And this change, the differentiation between male and female fashion, was assisted by an increased range of imported dyes and fabrics for the elite, who could afford the latest trends. The same elaboration shows itself in the greater use of fur and embroidery, and the increased complexity of women's headgear as the 15th century progressed. Lower down the social scale, there is evidence for a greater impact of fashion after the 1350s, albeit on a much reduced scale compared with the fashion leaders of society. This revealed itself in increased incidence of linen undergarments, tailored tunics, and dyed hoods, hose, and cloaks. By 1400, shorter and closer fitting styles had descended the social ladder from the aristocracy. So, of course, that happens when you try to control fashion or use it as a differentiator. You really can't control where it goes or who adopts what and how, which is kind of comforting, right? So yeah, I will say most of this book has nothing to do with fashion or textiles or yarn or anything else. It's really like a history of all different aspects of society in the Middle Ages in England. But I liked that little tidbit. I thought you would find it interesting too. I don't particularly highly recommend this book. I don't think it's the most well-written history book, but if you like this kind of thing and you find it for $1 at your local library, pick it up. All right, so I'll end there. Thanks for sticking with me for another long one. Someday I'll do a shorter video. We'll see when that day is. I don't know when. But I'd love to hear from you in the comments if you have any thoughts, any yarns that you want to try this year, yarns that I should know about based on the 5 that are my favorites. I'd love to hear your recommendations, and I will see you next time. Thanks so much. Bye.